What started as a routine Tuesday morning for 73-year-old Robert Henderson would become the most devastating financial nightmare of his life, ultimately costing him $450,000 in pure gold bars handed directly to a stranger from India. But this story doesn't end in despair. Through the relentless efforts of an anonymous hacker who dedicates his life to hunting down scammers, justice would eventually prevail in the most unexpected way. The elderly man's life savings, converted into gleaming gold bars and delivered to what he believed was a government agent, seemed lost forever until technology and determination collided to create one of the film's most satisfying revenge stories you'll ever hear. If you're enjoying this incredible story of justice and want to see more content about fighting back against scammers, please hit that like button, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe for more amazing stories like this one. Robert Henderson lived alone in his modest suburban home in Phoenix, Arizona, spending his retirement years tending to his garden and video calling his grandchildren who lived across the country. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier, leaving him with their combined life savings of nearly $500,000, money they had carefully accumulated over 40 years of marriage through disciplined saving and smart investments. Robert was cautious with technology but had learned to use his smartphone and computer to stay connected with family and manage his finances online. The nightmare began on what seemed like an ordinary Tuesday when Robert's phone rang at 8:30 in the morning. The caller identified himself as Agent Michael Thompson from the Federal Trade Commission, speaking with an authoritative tone that immediately commanded attention. Agent Thompson explained that Robert's social security number had been compromised and was being used in a massive money laundering operation involving drug cartels and international criminals. The caller provided Robert's full social security number, his mother's maiden name, and even his bank account numbers, information that convinced Robert this was legitimate. Agent Thompson explained that Robert's accounts were in immediate danger, and that criminals were already attempting to drain his savings. To protect his money, Robert needed to act quickly and follow specific instructions. The scammer painted a terrifying scenario where Robert could lose everything and potentially face criminal charges if he didn't cooperate immediately. Fear gripped Robert as he listened to detailed explanations of how his identity was being used to fund illegal activities across multiple states. The sophisticated scammer spent over 2 hours on that first call, building trust and creating urgency. Agent Thompson explained that the only way to protect Robert's money was to convert it into gold bars, which couldn't be traced or stolen by the criminals who had compromised his accounts. He instructed Robert to withdraw his savings and purchase gold bars from a local precious metals dealer, explaining that a federal agent would collect the gold for safekeeping until the investigation concluded. Over the following 3 days, Agent Thompson called Robert multiple times daily, providing updates on the supposed investigation and maintaining the pressure. The scammer had done his homework, referencing real Federal Trade Commission procedures and using official-sounding language that reinforced the illusion of legitimacy. Robert, isolated and frightened, followed every instruction without question. On Friday morning, Robert visited 3 different banks to withdraw his life savings, telling concerned bank employees that he was making a large investment. The scammer had coached him on what to say to avoid raising suspicions. With $450,000 in cash, Robert drove to a precious metals dealer and purchased gold bars, his hands shaking as he completed the transaction that would devastate his financial future. Agent Thompson arranged for the pickup to occur at a local shopping centre parking lot. Robert waited nervously in his car, clutching a heavy bag containing gold bars worth nearly $500,000. A young man approached, showed what appeared to be federal identification, and calmly took possession of Robert's entire life savings. The supposed agent promised Robert would receive documentation within 48 hours and disappeared into the crowded parking lot. When no documentation arrived and Agent Thompson's phone number went to voicemail, Robert's growing anxiety turned to horrifying realization. He had been scammed out of everything he owned. The shame and embarrassment were overwhelming, but Robert eventually contacted local police and filed a report. Unfortunately, the trail seemed cold and investigators offered little hope of recovery. This is where our anonymous hacker enters the story. We must keep his identity protected for his safety, but he's a YouTuber who dedicates his life to fighting scammers and helping victims recover from these devastating crimes. Through his network of contacts and advanced technical skills, he learned about Robert's case and decided to investigate. The hacker began by analysing the phone numbers used in the scam, tracing digital footprints that led to a call centre operation based in Mumbai, India. Using sophisticated techniques that we cannot detail for security reasons, he infiltrated the scammers' communication systems and discovered they were running dozens of similar operations simultaneously, targeting elderly Americans with fake government agent scenarios. What the hacker discovered was infuriating. The scammers had detailed scripts, victim profiles, and even training materials teaching new recruits how to manipulate elderly targets. They celebrated their successful scams in group chats, showing complete disregard for the lives they were destroying. The operation was generating millions of dollars annually, with Robert's case being just one of many devastating victories. But the hacker wasn't content with just gathering information. He began documenting everything, collecting evidence of the scammers' activities, financial transactions, and personal information. Through careful investigation, he identified the specific individual who had orchestrated Robert's scam and even located the local accomplice who had collected the gold bars in the parking lot. The hacker's next move was brilliant. Instead of simply reporting his findings to authorities, he began systematically disrupting the scammers' operations. He flooded their phone systems with automated calls, crashed their computers with targeted attacks, and even managed to access their financial accounts. The scammers found themselves unable to operate effectively as their entire infrastructure came under relentless digital assault. Simultaneously, the hacker was building a comprehensive case file with evidence that would be admissible in court. He coordinated with international law enforcement agencies, providing detailed documentation of the scammers' activities and helping authorities understand the scope of the operation. His technical expertise bridged the gap between digital evidence and legal prosecution. The breakthrough came when the hacker discovered that the main scammer, who had posed as Agent Thompson, was planning to travel to Dubai for a vacation funded by his criminal activities. Working with Interpol and Indian authorities, law enforcement agencies coordinated a complex operation to arrest the scammer at Mumbai airport before his departure. The arrest was spectacular. The scammer, whose real name was Rajesh Patel, was taken into custody along with 6 accomplices who had been operating the call center. Authorities seized computers, phones, financial records, and even recovered some gold bars that hadn't yet been sold. The investigation revealed that this single operation had scammed over 200 elderly Americans out of more than $10 million. For Robert, the news of the arrest provided some emotional closure, though the financial recovery process would take months. Through asset forfeiture and international cooperation, authorities eventually recovered approximately 60% of Robert's stolen money. While not a complete recovery, it was far more than anyone had initially expected. The anonymous hacker's work didn't stop with this single case. He continues his mission of hunting down scammers and protecting vulnerable victims, using his technical skills to fight back against these predatory criminals. His YouTube channel, which we cannot name for his protection, has become a valuable resource for scam awareness and prevention. This story represents just one victory in an ongoing war against scammers who target elderly and vulnerable individuals. Hundreds of similar incidents occur every month, and unfortunately not all victims are as fortunate as Robert. Law enforcement agencies estimate that elder fraud costs Americans over $3 billion annually, with many cases never reported due to shame and embarrassment. Take this video as educational content and remain extremely careful in your own life. Legitimate government agencies will never demand immediate payment in gold bars, cryptocurrency, or gift cards. They will never threaten arrest over the phone or demand secrecy about their investigations. When in doubt, hang up and contact the agency directly using official phone numbers found on their websites. Trust your instincts and remember that it's always better to be cautious than to become another victim of these heartless criminals. The psychological manipulation tactics used by these scammers go far beyond simple deception. They employ sophisticated social engineering techniques that have been refined over decades of criminal activity. The scammers who targeted Robert understood exactly which emotional buttons to press and when to apply pressure. They began their operation by establishing credibility through official-sounding language and government terminology that most people associate with legitimate authority. The initial phone call came at 9:30 in the morning on Tuesday, a time when elderly individuals are typically alert and available to answer their phones. The caller introduced himself as Agent Michael Thompson from the Social Security Administration Fraud Division, speaking with a clear American accent that had been carefully practiced to sound authentic and trustworthy. What makes these scams particularly insidious is the way they exploit natural human psychology. The scammers create an artificial sense of urgency by claiming that Robert's social security number had been compromised and was being used in criminal activities across multiple states. They They told him that his bank accounts were at risk of being frozen within 24 hours unless immediate action was taken. This time pressure prevents victims from thinking clearly or consulting with family members who might recognize the scam. The emotional manipulation escalates when they introduce fear-based scenarios, telling Robert that failure to cooperate would result in his arrest and imprisonment. They painted vivid scenarios of him being handcuffed in front of his neighbors and spending years in federal prison for crimes he didn't commit. The scammers demonstrated their knowledge of Robert's personal information, which they had likely purchased from data brokers or obtained through previous security breaches. They knew his full name, address, phone number, and even some details about his financial situation. This information gave their claims an air of legitimacy that made Robert believe they were genuine government agents. They explained that his social security number had been linked to a drug trafficking operation in Texas, and that suspicious bank transfers had been traced to his accounts. The level of detail they provided about these fictional crimes was overwhelming and designed to make Robert feel helpless and dependent on their guidance. As the conversation progressed, the scammers introduced the concept of asset protection, explaining that Robert needed to convert his savings into gold bars to prevent the government from seizing his money during the investigation. They told him that gold was the only asset that couldn't be frozen or confiscated by federal agencies, and that this was a standard procedure used to protect innocent victims of identity theft. The scammer, who now claimed to be Agent Sarah Martinez from the Federal Trade Commission, explained that Robert would need to purchase exactly $450,000 worth of gold bars from a specific dealer who was authorized to handle federal protection cases. The gold dealer, they claimed, was a trusted government contractor located in downtown Chicago who specialized in emergency asset protection services. Robert was instructed to withdraw his life savings from multiple bank accounts and visit 3 different precious metals dealers to avoid triggering federal reporting requirements. The scammers stayed on the phone with him throughout this process, coaching him on what to say to bank tellers and gold dealers to avoid suspicion. They told him to explain that he was diversifying his investment portfolio and purchasing gold as a hedge against inflation, which sounded reasonable enough to the financial professionals he encountered. Over the course of 3 days, Robert made multiple trips to different locations, each time carrying large amounts of cash and returning home with heavy boxes of gold bars. The scammers had convinced him that he was participating in a covert federal operation and that discussing the situation with anyone, including his family, would compromise the investigation and potentially make him an accessory to the crimes being committed with his stolen identity. This isolation tactic is crucial to the success of these scams, as it prevents victims from seeking advice from people who might recognize the fraud. The handoff was orchestrated with military precision. Robert was instructed to meet a federal courier at a specific location in Grant Park at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon on a Friday. The scammers told him that the courier would be driving a black sedan with government plates and would identify himself using a specific code phrase. The person who met Robert appeared professional and official, wearing a dark suit and carrying what looked like federal identification. He spoke with authority about the ongoing investigation and assured Robert that his cooperation was helping to bring down a major criminal organization. What Robert didn't know was that this supposed federal agent was actually a money mule, someone recruited by the scammers to collect the gold and transfer it to the criminal organization. These mules are often individuals who have been deceived themselves, believing they are working for legitimate companies or government agencies. The gold bars were quickly transported to a secure location where they were either sold immediately or prepared for shipment overseas, making them nearly impossible to trace or recover. The anonymous hacker who would eventually help bring justice to this case had been monitoring similar scam operations for months. This individual, whose identity we must protect for safety reasons, operates a YouTube channel dedicated to exposing and disrupting scammer networks. Their technical expertise and dedication to helping victims has made them a valuable ally to law enforcement agencies around the world. Using advanced digital forensics techniques, they were able to trace the communication patterns and financial flows associated with Robert's case. The investigation revealed that this particular scam operation was part of a larger criminal network with connections spanning multiple countries. The scammers operated from call centers in various locations, using voice-over internet protocol technology to mask their true locations and make their calls appear to originate from government phone numbers. They had sophisticated scripts and training materials that taught them how to impersonate federal agents convincingly and how to overcome victim objections and resistance. The breakthrough in Robert's case came when our anonymous hacker discovered a critical vulnerability in the scammer's communication system. Through careful analysis of digital breadcrumbs left behind during their operations, they uncovered a pattern that would ultimately lead to the criminals' downfall. The scammers had been using a centralized server to coordinate their activities, and this server contained detailed records of not just Robert's case, but dozens of other victims across the country. Each victim's information was meticulously catalogued, including their personal details, the amount stolen, and the specific psychological manipulation techniques used against them. The level of organization was both impressive and deeply disturbing, revealing just how sophisticated these criminal enterprises had become. What made this particular discovery so significant was the real-time nature of the data. The hacker could see active cases in progress, watching as elderly victims were being manipulated and coerced into handing over their life savings. Among these active cases was an 82-year-old woman in Florida who was being convinced to withdraw $37,000 from her retirement account. There was also a 75-year-old man in Ohio who had already purchased $15,000 worth of gift cards and was being instructed to buy more. The urgency of the situation became crystal clear as our anonymous hero realized that every moment of delay meant more victims would fall prey to these heartless criminals. The technical aspects of the investigation revealed fascinating details about how modern scam operations function. The criminals were using voice modulation software to make their agents sound more authoritative and American. They had access to databases containing personal information about potential victims, including their ages, approximate income levels, and even details about their family members. This information allowed them to craft highly personalized and convincing stories that would resonate with each individual target. For Robert's case specifically, they had researched his background enough to know about his late wife's medical expenses and his concerns about financial security in his golden years. The psychological manipulation techniques employed by these scammers were particularly insidious. They would begin each call with a sense of urgency, claiming that the victim's accounts were in immediate danger. This created a state of panic that made rational thinking difficult. They would then position themselves as the solution to the problem, offering to help protect the victim's money through the gold bar conversion scheme. Throughout the conversation, they would use techniques borrowed from legitimate sales training, such as creating false scarcity by claiming that the protection program was only available for a limited time and using social proof by mentioning other customers who had successfully protected their assets using the same method. The gold bar aspect of the scam was particularly clever from a criminal perspective. Unlike wire transfers or cryptocurrency transactions, which leave digital trails, physical gold transactions are much harder to trace once completed. The scammers had established a network of couriers who would collect the gold from victims and transport it through various intermediaries before it eventually made its way out of the country. In Robert's case, the courier who collected his $450,000 worth of gold was actually a low-level participant in the scheme, unaware of the full scope of the operation. This person believed they were simply providing a legitimate courier service and had no idea they were facilitating a major financial crime. The international nature of the operation became apparent as the investigation deepened. The call center operations were indeed based in India, but the criminal network extended far beyond a single location. There were coordination centers in multiple countries, each handling different aspects of the operation. Some locations specialized in the initial contact and victim identification, while others focused on the psychological manipulation and money extraction phases. The most sophisticated locations handled the money laundering and asset conversion processes that turned the stolen funds into untraceable wealth for the criminal organization. Our anonymous hacker's investigation also revealed the human cost of these operations on both sides of the criminal equation. Many of the call center workers were themselves victims of economic desperation, working in poor conditions for minimal pay, while the organizers of the scheme reaped enormous profits. These workers were often told that they were participating in legitimate business activities, such as debt collection or financial consulting. Only the higher-level operatives understood the true nature of what they were doing, and they maintained control through a combination of financial incentives and threats. The technical evidence gathered during this investigation was substantial and compelling. Digital forensics revealed detailed logs of phone calls, including recordings of conversations with victim. Financial records showed the flow of money through various accounts and the conversion of stolen funds into different assets. Communication records between different parts of the criminal organization provided insights into their operational structure and decision-making processes. Perhaps most importantly, the evidence included real-time data about ongoing scams, which meant that law enforcement could potentially intervene to save other victims even as they built their case against the criminals. The coordination between our anonymous hacker and law enforcement agencies required careful planning and execution. Traditional police investigations move slowly and methodically, following established procedures and legal requirements. However, the fast-paced nature of online criminal activity meant that evidence could disappear quickly if not preserved properly. The hacker had to work within legal boundaries while ensuring that critical evidence was captured and documented in ways that would be admissible in court. This required a deep understanding of both technical systems and legal procedures, skills that our anonymous hero had developed through years of experience fighting cybercriminals. The emotional impact on Robert during this phase of the investigation was profound. Learning that his case was part of a much larger criminal enterprise brought both relief and additional distress. On one hand, it validated his experience and made it clear that he had been targeted by sophisticated criminals rather than simply making a foolish mistake. On the other hand, discovering the scope of the operation and the number of other victims made him realize just how vulnerable elderly people had become in the digital age. The knowledge that his stolen money was funding ongoing criminal activities that were hurting other innocent people added another layer of pain to his already difficult situation. The breakthrough came when our anonymous hacker successfully traced the gold bars to a specific location in Mumbai, working closely with international law enforcement agencies who had been building cases against this criminal network for months. The coordination required between multiple countries, jurisdictions, and legal systems was extraordinary, but the evidence was overwhelming. Robert watched from his home as news broke that several members of the scamming operation had been arrested, including the individual who had personally collected his $450,000 worth of gold. The emotional release he felt was indescribable, a mixture of vindication, relief, and profound gratitude toward the stranger who had refused to let his case go unsolved. While Robert may never recover his entire life savings, the arrest sent shockwaves through the scamming community and prevented countless future victims from experiencing the same devastating loss. This story represents just one victory in an ongoing war against elder fraud. Hundreds of similar incidents occur daily, but not every victim finds their guardian angel. Stay vigilant, verify everything, and remember that legitimate organizations never demand payment in gold bars or cryptocurrency. If this story opened your eyes to these dangers, please subscribe and share to help protect others from falling victim to these heartless criminals.